My guest this morning is Laura Berg, and she is the president of My Smart Hands, a company that teaches baby sign language and now boasts over 200 instructors worldwide. Her published book, The Baby Signing Bible, has cemented her status as the go-to authority on baby sign language. She is a college professor and professional speaker that shares her entrepreneurial journey with audiences around the world. Laura holds a postgraduate degree in education, BA in Sociology and Child Studies, and a diploma in ASL and Deaf studies. She has won many awards and has been recognized in the media all over the world. She appeared on Dragon's Den television show, Shark Tank in the U.S., where she secured a business deal from two of the investors. Laura was also named a top 10 Chatelaine Entrepreneur of the Year and a finalist in the TBOT Business of the Year award. She has appeared on the front page of the Toronto Star. She's been showcased in the Globe and Mail's report on Business Magazine, MacLean's Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, Pregnancy and Newborn Magazine, and many more. She's actually calling me out of Toronto, Canada, and we're going to be talking about the baby signing book as well as her latest release, Thriving Life. So with that being said, Laura Berg, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. As I said, she's calling me all the way out of Canada from Toronto. So you're up there with the Toronto Blue Jays.
That's right.
That's the baseball team up there in Toronto. All right. So I tell you what, okay, we like I said, when we talked on the telephone, it's very conversational. The only question I kind of start with is kind of like, where did it all begin, particularly in terms of, being an author and having now, the second book, Thriving, or however many books it is in total. But the first one looks like it was the Baby Signing Bible. So my question kind of is like, where did this all begin? Did you set out to be an author whenever you were in school, in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, whatever? Did you set out to do that, or did this something come along later in life based on experiences?
That's a great question, actually. And no, I wasn't an aspiring author growing up. I was really intimidated by writing, actually. And it sort of came out of a desire to stay at home with my daughter after I had her. So living in a big city, I have to, you really do need two incomes. And I wanted to quit my job. I was a teacher before having my daughter. And it took us 3 years to get pregnant with her. We went through a lot of infertility treatments, and so when I finally did get her, I thought, I'm not going to leave her. I need to stay at home. And so I thought, well, how can I make money and stay at home? And because in Teachers College, I took American Sign Language as my second language credit, I fell in love with it. And I would use it in my classroom. I used it for literacy skills. And, as I researched more about the benefits of using sign language with hearing children as a communication tool, I was fascinated. And so I always knew that I would sign with my daughter because babies can communicate with gestures or sign language before they can speak, because it's the gross motor skills versus the fine motor skills. And so when I had my daughter, I thought, well, I taught her how to sign. I can teach other moms how to sign. And I started this company, My Smart Hands. And it grew into something that I never imagined it would grow into. My idea was just to teach some classes until she was in school, and then I would go back to work. And I never imagined that it would blossom into what it has today. And so it's an opportunity to showcase the fact that I'm the expert in the field. I thought writing a book would cement my expertise. And so that's how it came to be.
Well, one of our mantras or philosophies, if you will, is learn something new every day. And I tell folks all the time, a lot of times when I say that, people think that I'm talking about something monumental or something, extremely complex. And not necessarily, because you just gave me already at 7:10 this morning something that I just did not know, and that was babies could learn sign language. I never get. I know we deal with it with adults, but I never thought about. So when we're talking babies, how old are we talking?
Oh, we're talking, 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, little babies before they can talk.
So we're talking a 6-month-old actually, as you sit there and you do the various signs with your hands, they would pick that up and know how to communicate back and forth.
Exactly. It's just the same way when you teach a child how to wave bye-bye. Most babies can wave bye-bye before they can talk. And it's just by repetition. You're constantly saying bye-bye, bye-bye, and you take their hand and you wave for them, and they get really excited. Yeah, bye-bye. You do the same thing with sign language. So you start really basic. Most parents start with milk, the sign milk, because milk is such a big part of their life when they're babies. And then once they learn that, you can move on to other things, especially when they start eating food. You introduce food signs, and it really does help to reduce their frustration because they're able to communicate to you where they don't have the words to be able to communicate. You're giving them the signs to do so.
That is amazing. I'm telling you, I've had, all of my children are grown now, all 4 of them. I mean, we're talking like 20, she'll be 21 in May. We're talking 26, we're talking 27, and we're talking 32. And never throughout any of them had I thought in terms of sign language. Are we talking sign language? Are we talking for any baby, or are we talking for babies that are deaf?
No, any baby. So this is specifically for hearing babies, because you teach in a different way with hearing babies than you would with deaf babies, because deaf babies, it becomes their language. With hearing babies, it's a communication tool. So we still use American Sign Language in our classes, just simply out of respect for the fact that the language already exists. Why would we create fake, made-up signs when we can introduce families to this beautiful language? And I just take specific signs from the language. So American Sign Language is very complex. It has, there's a lot with sentence structure and all of that nuances of a language. So we don't teach parents all of those nuances. We teach them just one sign for one word. So
your classes are made up of the parents who would like to teach the sign language to their baby. So it's the parents who are in class.
Yeah, it's like a mommy and me class. So they bring their babies, and we have songs where we incorporate the signs with the songs, and it's just a way of teaching the parents how to do the signs, because a lot of parents might feel intimidated. Oh, I don't know how to sign, so I can't do this. But it's really, really simple. And then it also provides parents the opportunity to socialize with other parents.
Correct.
That's so important.
And see, this is the thing about sign language. And what people don't realize is, because forever I have been working to speak Spanish fluently. And when I say forever, I'm talking about since I was in high school. We're going back since I was like 15, 16 years old up to today. So we're talking about 45 years plus, and I still have not gotten Spanish fluently. I mean, I can speak it, I can read it fluently, and I can speak it very slowly and understand it slowly. But where I'm going with this is that's being bilingual or learning another language. Sign language for me is the same as music, because I'm a musician and I know how to read music. That's another language. Sign language is another language. People don't really associate music or sign language as being, say, for example, bilingual. If you know how to speak English and you know how to do sign language, that would classify you as bilingual.
100% it would, yes.
But that's not the way we think. That's why I say it never dawned on me until having this conversation with you. Matter of fact, whenever I was doing my research on you, it never dawned on me that you could teach babies sign language. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing here, this book is going back to September of 2012. It says, as confirmed, and I'm reading on the Amazon page, as confirmed by the American Academy of Pediatrics, infant sign language is a boon for enhancing communication between parents and babies, helping to forge an important bond early in a child's life. The Baby Signing Bible provides step-by-step instructions for parents and other caregivers, as well as insight into why baby sign language is useful for children of all ages. Kids with special needs can also benefit greatly from this program. Featuring 400 signs, the book covers essential nouns such as, like you said, milk, verbs such as eat, and descriptors such as more. In addition, the Baby Signing Bible features real-life stories from parents who have successfully signed with their children, along with the fun songs and games that help families learn to sign and sing, quote-unquote. Confidence-building illustrations enhance the basics for mastering vocabulary words. So that's the description of the Baby Signing Bible. And I don't know, are there other books like that? I mean, like, were you the first, or are there other books out there like? Because again, that's not a concept that even came to my mind.
You know, it's funny. If you were to have a baby today, it would probably come to your mind because it's pretty popular. There are other books out there. There were some researchers who had discovered the idea or the concept of signing with hearing babies because what they had started researching was hearing babies with deaf parents. And what they found was those babies had a larger vocabulary through the use of signs at a younger age. And so they thought, well, why can't we apply this to all babies? And that's sort of how it came out. And I was just so fascinated by it. And I'll tell you a story if you're interested about
by all means.
An aha moment for me with baby signing. So I told you I started with my daughter. When she was 10 months old, she was in her high chair, and I was giving her Cheerios. And she was signing more, and then throwing her Cheerios on the floor. And I'd say, then you don't want more. What do you want? And so you think about it, the concept of more is an abstract concept. What it meant to babies is, I want something. And so she's signing more, throwing her Cheerios on the floor. She signed more cheese. So she put a 2-word sentence together at 10 months, and I hadn't offered her cheese during that snack time. There was no cheese in sight, so she wouldn't have been able to point at it. So you think about it. She doesn't have these as sign. If she's a baby that doesn't have these, she'd be throwing her Cheerios on the floor. I'm, as her mom, thinking she's done. I'm putting her down. She's having a temper tantrum because she's not done. She wants something salty. I don't want something sweet. I want some cheese. But she can't tell me that she wants cheese verbally. And if I don't give her the tools to be able to tell me, then the communication isn't there. And the frustration starts. She would have been really mad at me. Then I would have been frustrated because I would have been like, why are you getting mad at me? What do you want? So that's at 10 months. Can you imagine?
Well, that is an amazing story because, first off, cognitively, that tells us that babies know what they want. And like you just said, really don't have a way to communicate it. So she knew in her mind that she wanted cheese, but because she doesn't know words yet, but since she already was taught sign language, she did know how to communicate with you in terms of, so she had the double communication thing going on in terms of throwing the Cheerios on the floor, which because a lot that, you know what, that would have told me as a parent, because I think babies and kids like to play that pick up and drop game. So that for me, that would have been like, oh, you want to play pick up and drop versus, as you were saying, she was really saying it, and then she signed it to you. I want cheese. And you were able to, and so did you get her the cheese?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Got her the cheese. Saved a temper tantrum. Made life easy.
That's dynamite. That is fascinating. That first off, that she was able to communicate it with you and you knew what she was saying and you were able to get it for her. Wow. That's something. So that was the first book. And this is going back to 2012. And this was dealing with, and the reason I'm starting with that is to kind of work our way to the latest release, which was a few months ago, back in November. Your publicist reached out to me and I get a lot of the emails from publicists, and they describe the books and I kind of determine who I want to invite on. So I saw yours and immediately said, oh, I got to invite her because this book, the latest book is called Thriving Life: How to Live Your Best Life No Matter the Cards You're Dealt. So the first question I'm going to ask, and I'll read the description of that as well, is like, how did we get from baby signing Bible to thriving life? So the description again is, learn how to take charge of your life and transform the way you view yourself, your relationships, and your experiences with this unique reference. Each chapter discusses a specific issue that many people struggle with, such as defining one's own happiness, dealing with rejection, and setting limits in relationships. With practical tips and a step-by-step approach to help find what makes you happy, you will learn to stop selling yourself short and how to rise above anything that life throws at you. Everyone has their own share of struggles, but with the right tools and attitude, it is possible to overcome and flourish. So my question is, how did we get from the baby signing Bible to, dealing with the cards that you dealt?
Yeah, it kind of doesn't seem like a natural line, does it? But I'm sort of like you, where I always love to do new things and learn new things. And, it was kind of just the next step in my life that I felt was something I always wanted to do. So a lot of people have had a hard life. I'm one of those people, but many, 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 many people have struggled. And I remember a friend of mine one time said, because I tell her stories of my childhood and things that I had to overcome and all of that. And she's like, oh my goodness, you should write a book. And, I'm thinking, why would I write a book? I'm nobody. Like,
wow.
What do I have to share that somebody else, like, there are people out there who are so much worse off than I was. And, you get into this mentality. And so she said, but with you have like what you've overcome, and then, you're so successful and you're so positive, and how do you do it? And I thought, really? Because I suffer from depression, and I feel like an imposter all the time, and I feel like people don't like me, and I have all of these insecurities that I wasn't sort of presenting to the world, thankfully. But I know that a lot of other people have that as well. And so the main catalyst of me doing this was I have a YouTube channel, and it started from promoting baby sign language. And it just kind of grew or morphed into something bigger than just simply baby sign language. I then started doing videos that was sharing our family's life and sharing crafts and recipes and just general information. And so I'm adopted. And when I was 22, I found my birth parents. Turns out they married each other. So they had me as a teenager, gave me up for adoption. Years later, got together and got married. Lovely story. Seems like an ideal situation. They brutally rejected me. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Do not contact us again. Don't contact our family. And I was devastated because growing up as an adopted child, I always felt like I was giveawayable. So somebody could actually give me away. And I know, logically, they did it to give me a better life. Emotionally, it's a completely different feeling. And so when I was rejected as an adult, it really solidified that feeling of me not being worthy, not being wanted. And so one year, I don't have anybody in my circle, my immediate circle, that has experienced this kind of form of rejection. So I thought, there has to be other people in the world that went through this. I can't be the only one. It can't just be a me problem. Please don't let it just be a me problem.
Right.
And so I did a video just sharing my story. This is what happened. It was a very emotional video. I was kind of not full out crying, but tears rolling in my eyes. It was very emotional. And I never imagined the reaction that I would get from people all around the world. People would write in the comment sections. People would email me saying, thank you so much for sharing your story, because I went through the same thing. I had been rejected by my birth parents, and I felt the exact same way that you feel. And it's so nice to know that it's not a me problem. It's not me. We're all going through that collectively. Whoever posted comments, and we started kind of forming this beautiful community of support. It was amazing. That video now has over 750,000 views. So
wow.
You can imagine people who are searching for this type of content. And so it was that made me think I need to write a book, because if I can make an impact in people's lives by sharing one little blurb of my life, then other people can relate to things that I've experienced, and we can kind of support each other and feel less alone, really.
Well, first off, I'm listening to that and mouth dropped open. This is amazing, because this is the thing. Like, again, just like with your first book, when we were talking about baby sign language, had not really given that a lot of thought. Had never realized the type of rejection that you're talking about is that prevalent in terms of literally finding your birth parents and then being rejected by them. And what I'm hearing from you is that it wasn't just a you thing, that it was something that is, more widespread than one might think until somebody kind of takes the lid off. And I also heard you sharing about in terms of the challenge of depression. And and my last few shows have been dealing somewhat with that. And I tell folks all the time, there's a quote that's attributed to Robin Williams. I don't know if he said it or not, but they always have his picture on it, where he says, folks who are suffering from depression are not faking being sick. They're faking being well.
Yes.
And I heard you say how, folks on outside of you don't know what's going on the inside of you. And clearly, after just sharing that part of the story, we can understand why. Because rejection is no joke. It is no joke. And you were talking about those voices or that feeling of not feeling worthy. Of, that's what you're constantly, that's what's going on inside of your head. Matter of fact, my guest last week was Pamela Gale Johnson, and she wrote a book on happiness. And a couple of weeks ago was Steve Pemberton. And he wrote his book, The Lighthouse Effect, but he also has a movie, A Chance in the World, that talks about him being a foster child and what he went through as a foster child. So as I talk to you all, I sit here and I'm absolutely amazed of what folks have gone through. And yet we're able to survive and move through and thrive, or what have you, no pun intended. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at your table of contents. And what we'll do is we can talk a little bit about it, because I want folks to buy the book. So I don't want you to give everything away, but I will at least give them the table of contents. Chapter 1, Stop Being a Victim. Chapter 2, Talk minus action gives you nothing. Chapter 3, Define your happiness. Chapter 4, Making good relationships last. Chapter 5, Toxic family. Chapter 6, Toxic romance. Chapter 7, Toxic friendships. Chapter 8, Stop comparing your life to others. Chapter 9, What if bad experiences were just experiences? Chapter 10, we were just talking about rejection, overcoming rejection. Chapter 11, it's okay to ask for help. And you just talked about in terms of sharing your story. Chapter 12 was share your life lessons. So kind of walk us through without giving it all away, because I really do hope for folks to buy the book, as the title of it is Thriving Life. How to live your best life no matter the cards you're dealt. Now, each one of those chapters look like a different deck of cards.
True.
So talk to me about the chapters.
So the idea behind this book was I had things in my life that were really problematic. And after talking to a lot of people, because as you mentioned in the beginning when you were introducing me, I've had the privilege of being able to speak at conferences all around the world, which means that I've been able to talk to people all around the world. And there seem to be common threads with people who have issues in their lives. And each one of my chapters touches upon things that, in general, a lot of people do struggle with. So, the victim mentality. I think that's almost my harshest chapter in the book, because people who have the victim mentality, sometimes it's hard to hear that you are acting like a victim. And I don't mean that. So, if you're kind of struggling with it, it can feel a little bit harsh. But I realized in my life I was going through it as a victim. And I was letting things that happened to me in the past affect my present because of how I was acting and how I was allowing my perceptions to guide my behavior based on the fact that I was a victim in the past. So, for example, my father was very abusive. And so I carried that kind of abuse mentality with me. Poor me, I really suffered, and it was really hard, and I carried that into other relationships. And then I thought, what, by doing that, I'm allowing him to continue victimizing me.
Correct.
In the present day. So what I had to do is recognize the behavior that was surrounding that mentality and stop it, which is not easy. It's work. It's work to identify it's work to be mindful of, and then it's work to actually stop doing that behavior. And so in my book, each chapter, I share a personal experience as to what happened, because sometimes you get self-help books from people who have the educational background, like a therapist, but they don't have the personal experience.
Correct.
You know, if you are a victim, you need to do this. And it's like, yeah, okay, great that you're telling me that, you know, with the person who has never experienced hardship in their life.
Correct.
Not saying that people haven't, but, you know, it really does ring a different tone if somebody has walked in your shoes.
I know exactly what you're talking about. You're exactly 100% correct. No, seriously, there is a difference between the book knowledge and the life knowledge, the experience, like you just said, of there are some experiences that if you have not experienced them, you cannot relate to the person who has or is experiencing them.
Exactly. And so before I wrote the book, I went back to school to get my psychotherapy degree because I wanted to come at it from an educated standpoint and from that sort of background where I can tell you what the textbooks say to do. And I can tell you what I implemented in my sort of therapy process. But the important part of my book, I feel, is my lived experiences. And so in that chapter, I tell you about what happened to me. I tell you about my behavior. And then I tell you about how to overcome sort of victim mentality from a therapeutic tool sort of way. And then I give exercises and I ask questions, and you actually can get out a pen and a paper and answer the questions. And it really helps to guide you through overcoming certain things. Now, in the book, you can really read any chapter you want. You don't have to read it in order. And I made it that way because one chapter might not resonate with you, but another chapter might. And it's that chapter that will maybe make an impactful difference to you. So there are chapters in general that I think people can relate to. Like if you do nothing, nothing happens. So a lot of us are our own worst enemy. We want to do something, or we wish something would happen for us. We're waiting for an opportunity. But if you don't actually take the steps to make that opportunity happen for yourself, then nothing will happen. And we are also our own worst enemy when it comes to that. You know, we get in our heads, oh, I can't do it. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I'm not smart enough. I can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Again, I tend to quote things that I see on social media or what have you. And I was sharing this with my sister last night, and I've shared this quote on the air as well, that the enemy, meaning the voices in your head, Satan, however you want to describe as negative, whispers in your ear the exact opposite of what you are. So if you're beautiful, if you're smart, if you're attractive, if you're whatever, the voice in your head is telling you the opposite. That nope, you're, like you said, you're not worthy. You're not this, you're not beautiful. Nobody's going to want you. No, because that's where I was telling you about Steve Pemberson's The Chance in a World. There's actually a scene in the movie, because one of his books actually was turned into a film. There's a scene in the movie where the foster parent has this child recite, he's not worthy. I'm not worthy and nobody's going to want me. I mean, it was amazing to sit there and watch. But those are the type voices and messages that start coming through that you're right. If you don't have something to combat that, or some type of therapy or some type of strategies and tactics to go back up against that, it's going to be a real struggle.
That's right. Yeah. And that's, I do talk in my book about that specific sort of thing where you have the imposter syndrome. You know, even I still struggle with it. Sometimes I think, well, why would they want me? I'm not, I don't have credentials enough. I don't have this. I don't have that. I'm not good enough. And we all experience that at one point or another in our life. And it's about stopping and recognizing that mindset, that mentality, and then making the change to convince yourself otherwise. You have to be your own best friend, right?
And that's interesting, man. I'll tell you why. Because I usually don't get to read the books from end to end until after the interview, because I'm always, each week I have a different guest, so it's a different interview, I get a different book. But I got, like I said, I got the press release from the publicist and did not even give a thought in terms of you suffering with depression or any of the things that you just described. All I saw was, the description that they had, the press release. Yes, I want her on the show. So as far as no, I don't think she's not worthy. Nope, she's not good enough. None of that crossed the mind. Yet in your head, that's what in your head is telling you.
Yeah, exactly. And we all go through that, even at work. Oh, I don't deserve the raise. I don't deserve the promotion. I shouldn't apply for this job because I'm not qualified, and you just have to sometimes take the leap and believe in yourself. And it's really hard to do sometimes. So, I share in my book how I experience it and give concrete examples, and then move on to here's what you can do to overcome what you're going through.
Now I'm looking at chapters 5, 6, and 7, and each one of them start with the word toxic. How are you defining toxic, and where does this toxicity come from?
I think a lot of us at some point has also had experience with a toxic relationship. And if you have experienced toxic family relationship, 9 times out of 10, you will have also experienced toxic friendships and toxic romantic relationship, because you accept that into your life because that's all you know. That's what you're used to. You may have had the healthiest relationship with your family growing up, but you may find yourself in a situation where you have friends that might be toxic. And you need to recognize that and understand that it's okay to set boundaries in relationships for your own mental health and well-being. And it's okay to leave relationships if those boundaries can't be met. So really a toxic relationship is somebody who does not make you feel good, somebody who makes you feel less than, somebody who makes you question yourself, somebody who makes you feel bad. That is what I would define as toxic.
So there are 3 chapters, as she just said, dedicated to that. We have toxic family, we have toxic romance, and we have toxic friendships. That's chapter 5, 6, and 7. And you said each chapter is a standalone, so you don't have to read them in order as if you were reading a novel or something. That's
right. Yeah. So, if the toxic family doesn't resonate with you because you haven't experienced that, then don't read the chapter. You don't need to. If, you're in a relationship that feels toxic to you and you want to kind of address, because we tend to gaslight ourselves. Is it toxic? Is it just me?
Right.
Is it me? Right? And so it helps identify, what does it mean for you? Because whatever your truth is and whatever you feel is right for you is right. It is your truth. It doesn't matter if I would accept something else in my relationship. Oh, well, I would accept it, so why don't you? It doesn't matter. If you don't feel good, if this is not your truth, then that is valid. And you have to understand that your choices, your emotions, your feelings are valid. It doesn't matter if I don't feel that way.
Correct.
And that's a really important step to understanding.
Correct, which I'm going to jump back to chapter 3 because, like I said, my topic last week was happiness. And I see you have chapter 3, define your happiness. How does one go about doing that?
Yeah, well, I felt that was important to talk about because we grow up with an idea of what success or what happiness is. If I get married, if I have 2 cars, if I have a house, if I have an education, I will be happy. But maybe that's not what will make you happy because you don't want to have kids or you want to travel, so you don't want to be tied down to a mortgage. And if you feel that way, yet you still in your head believe that growing up, I need to be married, I need to have kids, I need to have a mortgage in order to be happy, then you'll never be happy because that is not your happiness. That's what society tells you you should be doing in order to be happy. And so it's something as simple as sitting down and thinking, what will bring you joy? What will bring you contentment in life? What do you want to have happen? And then start living your life to make those things happen for yourself. But you can't find happiness unless you know what it is.
Absolutely. Because, again, my guest last week was Pamela Gail Johnson, and her book is titled Practical Happiness: 4 Principles to Improve Your Life. So we had this conversation last week with Pamela about the very same thing that you're talking about. But it is amazing, and that's why there are so many books and chapters on how many people are clueless as to what happiness is for them.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So if you're clueless about it, then how do you define it? Because I mean, there's something that you just said that was very in terms of doing what society says. Okay, I got to have the house and the white picket fence and the 2 cars and the 2.5 kids, and I have to have a master's. And that's what society's saying is success. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing you all say is, if you don't want that, that's okay too.
Exactly. But you hit the head on the nail. Like, you hit the nail on the head. Sorry, that sounded really funny. Wait, I said it wrong. With saying that, how do you know? If you don't know, how can you define it? If you don't know what your happiness is, exactly, because we don't stop to think about it. We just go through the motions of life with the idea in our head that we grew up with, because why would we stop to think about it when we're told that that's what happiness is? And so I really, really love the idea of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and mindfulness. I like the 2 of them together because sometimes you have to be mindful, which is just stopping and thinking about something in a very present way. And we don't do that when we think about happiness. We don't think, okay, what is it? And it's really about taking the time to do it. So in the chapter, I go through activities for you to complete in order to help you define your happiness.
And so you brought up the word mindfulness. That's interesting because let me see. I'm an educator, and I've actually been taking a couple of online courses as a part of my job for mindfulness. I had Mindful Schools 101. Now I'm in Mindful Schools 201. And the thinking is that as educators, the more mindful we are, the more we will be able to help our students. And you're right in terms of being able to kind of focus on, okay, what's going on around me? What is my body saying? So being mindful of these things. And that mindfulness seems to be like a hot topic at the moment. And you're right. A lot of us just rush through constantly, just rush through our day. I have to do this. 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 As opposed to just slowing down, looking at the flower, looking at the rose, looking at, feeling the wind, whatever to kind of ground you.
Yeah, exactly. And it also helps to identify things that have happened maybe in your day that have made you feel not so great, but you didn't take the time to identify, and so that feeling overwhelms you, and you start feeling really blue, or you start feeling angry, or you start feeling upset, and you don't know what that trigger was because you didn't take the time to stop and really think about it. It happens to me all the time. I'll give you an example. Or a general example. So you might be walking down the street and run into a friend or an acquaintance, and that person is really short with you. They're like, "Hi, I gotta go, bye." And so in your mind, you're thinking, "Oh, that person doesn't like me. What did I do? They must have done something. Now they hate me. I'm a horrible person. My worth is garbage." And you just go down this rabbit hole of thoughts.
Right.
But you don't really identify it. You just are experiencing. You're experiencing these emotions. It goes on about your day, but that experience of the emotion is still there. And so you feel blue, and you almost forget about running into the person, but you're still feeling that feeling. And it overcomes the rest of your day because you haven't addressed what happened to make you feel that way. But if you actually stop and think, okay, I'm feeling really blue right now because that person just brushed me off. Okay, so what is the thought process around the feeling? So my thought is, I'm not liked because that person left abruptly. So that person doesn't like me. So what does that mean? That means I'm not a worthy person, and I feel, terrible. Like what are the thoughts associated to these emotions? And then this is where kind of CBT comes in, where you say, okay, I don't know that person doesn't like me. That's what I'm putting on them. So I'm going to think of 2 or 3 other reasons why that person would react the way that they did.
Correct.
That person reacted because they're late for work. That person reacted that way because they had a fight with their spouse this morning and they're just in their own head and it has nothing to do with me. Or the person hates me. So those are three things that could happen. Well, you don't know. You don't know either three of those to be true. So which of those three feel less bad? Well, obviously, maybe they're running late for work. That feels less bad. So that's what I'm going to choose to believe happened.
So, and that was a wonderful example because I'm looking here at the titles of your chapters, and I could see where now if you get triggered like that it would now, in using your chapters, could get tagged to this feeling of rejection, as well as now going back into the feeling of being the victim again. Like with that very example you just used, the fact that you may get blue from somebody being abrupt or short with you is because you've experienced rejection, which would now put you back into that victim mode. So you really do have to stop and, like you said, kind of process and say, okay, it didn't necessarily have to be me, because this is where I struggle whenever something happens to me and folks say, well, and the therapeutic and the literature and the reasons, don't take it personally. But for me, it's very hard, at least at the moment, to not take something personal that you were the target of. So in your example, you are the target of that person being short with you. So why would you not take it personally whenever the person got short with you as a person? And yet that's what everything is saying. Well, no, like you just said, oh, it probably had nothing to do with me. But yet that's how we process it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just really retraining yourself to think differently.
So talk a little bit, because I heard you mention CBT. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I started doing it years ago because I really wanted a way to overcome that mentality of being rejected, because I found that I was putting that on all of my relationships, which would eventually damage those relationships because of my insecurity. So I didn't really have anything specifically. I didn't need to go to talk therapy. I needed sort of more overall tools that I could apply to more situations in my life. And CBT just seemed to be right for me, because what it does is it takes you through recognizing the emotion that you're experiencing, and then recognizing the thoughts around those emotions, and then recognizing, are those thoughts real, valid, and fact? And if they're not, what are other ways of thinking about the situation that can change the emotion around it? And it just made total sense to me.
We'll see, which brings me to Chapter 11. It's okay to ask for help. Now, this is where a lot of folks who struggle the way you've been describing, you talk about going down the rabbit hole, is a lot of folks get messed up because they won't seek help, or they're in denial that they have an issue to begin with. So if you're in denial, like, well, there's nothing wrong with me, there's no need for me to go to a therapist, or the fact that there's stigma associated with now going to therapy, and I think less and less now over the last couple of years with this pandemic. I think it's less and less of a stigma, because I read an article about 3 weeks ago, at least where I am in New Jersey, that the therapists are turning people away because they're overbooked. They can't. But if the issue is you're in denial, or you don't admit that you have an issue and you don't seek help, now you're getting further and further in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard. It's funny that you say that, because I've been giving this a lot of thought lately, because I have a teenager, and I think it would be so great if the school systems had mandatory, like sort of a therapy course that students had to take, where they introduce different forms of therapy that you can apply. So not talk therapy, not one-on-one where you're going to get into the nitty-gritty, but therapy like mindfulness, like CBT. There's also a thing called DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which is becoming more and more popular. It's fantastic for teenagers. And my daughter goes to DBT, and she does really well with it, because she's very anxious, and she has a really hard time regulating her emotions. And it has really helped her because it gives you the tools. But what's great about that is it will normalize the idea of therapy.
Correct.
And it will give students the tools that they need to be functioning adults. On top of that, it will address those people who maybe don't feel like they need therapy, and then all of a sudden they go through it and they think, wow, I can actually apply these tools, and that's helpful. So that would be, I wish there would be a mandatory, not a unit where you take one unit in gym class, but a whole course would be. So can you imagine how much better the world would be?
Well, no, I could not agree with you more, because as I shared with you, I'm in Mindful Schools 201 now. I took 101 in the fall, rather. I took 101 in the fall, and then 201 started in January. And actually, we're on the break now, and then as of March 1st, I can go ahead with the last couple of weeks. The course ends in April, and it's an online course. But again, it's this. Our district is really kind of promoting, I was going to say pushing, but promoting the principles and for us to get like a core team within our schools of teachers who go through these mindfulness courses to the same point of what you're talking about in terms of, because it will help with classroom management. It will help with, how students interact, your relationships, so forth and so on. So I could not agree with you more. Matter of fact, financial literacy, I mean, to me, and I've been in education for a little while now, but some of the courses that we really need to succeed in life, to me, are missing. And, what you just described, the whole therapeutic piece is one, financial literacy is one, other areas that we deal with in life in general. I mean, it's nice to know about Plato and Aristotle, and it's nice to know all about that. It really is. And it's nice to know about Pythagorean theorem, and, it's nice to know about all that. But at the same time, we ought to be teaching practical life skills as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, 100%. Yeah, I almost want to take that on as my next project to make that happen. But going back to the whole, asking for help, it's really twofold. So it's one, being able to go to therapy if you need to, and figuring out, what type of therapy you need. And sometimes people go to therapy and it doesn't feel right and they stop it. But there's so many different types of therapy.
Right.
You have to figure out what works for you. And there are some bad therapists out there, or there are just some therapists that you may not connect with.
Correct.
And so keep trying. And here's another thing that's so hard is that it's so expensive. Like, therapy is so expensive. So it means that it's cost prohibitive to the people who probably need
it the most. Correct. I could not agree with you more.
I know. And I wish the government would fund more support, because if they did, I think that the country would actually be better off, because hospitals and everything like that wouldn't be as overwhelmed with things that could be prevented.
Correct.
A healthy mind.
I could not. I mean, this is the thing. And over the years, because this is my 21st year on the air, and over the years, I've had folks that have written books on the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, the insurance industry, so forth and so on. And what I always find extremely fascinating is the very industries that you would think would be about saving lives really aren't. So when you start getting into the pharmaceutical industry, when you start getting into the food industry, when you start getting into the energy industry, when you start getting into the traditional industry, they're really not about us as humans. The bottom line is profit before people.
Yeah.
And so what you just said, one would think, okay, if you want to have a better country of people, then some support systems financially, or you drop the price, one or the other. Because I've never understood why is it, things have to be as expensive as they are to begin with. I mean, if the insurance are going to turn around and pay, like, well, why do we play this game? So why not just either drop the price or make a program where folks can go, what have you? I don't know. But I tend to agree with you. If you want to have a better set of folks, then, preventative is better than reactive.
Oh, 100%.
So if you can prevent some of these things from going on, you actually would save more money on the back end.
Exactly. Yeah, 100% there. Excuse me. The other thing I would recommend people do is if you struggle with depression in your life, when you're in a depressive moment, it is impossible for you to ask for help. It is so completely hard. And so people, this is the thing that always bothers me. When I sort of come out of the fog and I'll say, I was really depressed. And people say, well, why didn't you ask for help? I would have been there for you. And I think you clearly don't understand what depression is, because when people are depressed, they cannot ask for help for two reasons. Number one, you don't necessarily even know that you need help.
Correct.
You don't know what to ask for, because you'd say, I need help. And they'd say, what can I do? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know what you can do. So putting that back on the person is really, really hard. And then you also feel you're dealing with your demons. You're like, people don't like me. So those are two things that are hard. So what I've done, because I had this conversation with a friend of mine, a very, very good friend, who said the same thing, why didn't you ask me for help? And I explained to her that it's impossible to do so and whatever. So we had come up with a system that when I'm feeling really, really low and really, really blue, I just can text her and say, do you want to go for poutine? So it's fries and gravy with cheese. Up here in Canada, it's very popular. So I want to go for fries and gravy, I'll say to her. And she knows what that means. So she knows that she needs to drop what she's doing and make time for me. Because sometimes I'll say, hey, you want to go out for dinner? And she'll say, yeah, I'm busy the next 2 weeks. You want to go, we'll book it down the road. And I say, okay, fine, because I don't need her. But if I say fries and gravy, then she knows I need her. So setting up a system in place will be helpful when you are feeling mentally healthy and strong, so that when you do experience those dips, you have a source where you can reach out. And she will take me out for dinner. We'll go out for dinner. We'll just talk. And I find sometimes just being able to talk to somebody, I eventually start to understand what I'm going through, and then be able to kind of come out of it the other side, because I'm able to talk.
Correct. Now, I'm so glad you said that, because over the last few years, actually, I've really come to understand that depression is one of the most misunderstood illnesses out there. Between depression and mental illness, they are one of the most and for folks who, like we talked earlier in the interview, who have not experienced that, they cannot relate nowhere close. And it's a really hard sell for folks on the outside looking in on the behavior of someone who is suffering either from the depression or the mental illness. Because like you just said, you're in a spot that you don't even know where you are. But it is a very hard sell to try to help somebody understand that.
Yes, it's true.
So I'm so glad that you just described what you described, and the fact that you said you had to put a system in place to, kind of like your life preserver. Like I'm throwing you the life preserver. Like, throw me the life preserver so I can get in. I don't sink. That's your system of saying, go get the food is a signal to let them know. But again, mental illness and all that has really come to the forefront over the last few years, particularly with so many athletes and celebrities that are, refusing to play or refusing to do whatever because I can't do this in this state. and even with the young lady that was the tennis player, I'm trying to think of her name, Osaki or something like she canceled out of the French Open, and they had a fit. They thought she was faking, like, how dare you, do you know how much money we're losing? And she was trying to tell them, I cannot do this in my state of mind. So that's what I mean by, in terms of it, for those who have not walked that walk or have had that experience or is a caregiver for somebody, it's a tough sell. Because folks are like, just leave them alone. No, let them go. Let them go. I mean, it's a tough sell when you're trying to convince somebody, no, that's not the person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. If you don't have experienced depression yourself, it's really hard to understand. Like, people look at me and they think I'm fine. And meanwhile, in my head,
Correct.
I'm screaming. Because I'm just coping because I have to cope, but I'm not coping well. And yeah, it's a demon. It's terrible.
So it's interesting that your book is Thriving Life, because you're actually doing the opposite of what the demon is saying.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
Well, no, you're not trying. You got the book out here, so.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's, it's a struggle, and it's hard work. And I went through a lot, and I thought, just by sharing, maybe I can touch one life. And if I can do that, then I'm happy.
All right, for the listening audience, if you've just joined us, I hope you've been with me since 6. Certainly, hopefully, you've been with me since 7. But we've come down to the end of our interview. My guest this morning was Laura Berg, and her book is Thriving Life: How to Live Your Best Life No Matter the Cards You're Dealt. I'm just going to do the station ID, and then I'm going to turn my mic off, Laura, and give you an opportunity to promote anything you can say with the exception of the dollar amount. So let me do our legal ID, what we call legal ID, station ID.
WPSC 88.7 FM, Wayne, New Jersey.
Part of the William Patterson Broadcast Network.
And now I am going to turn my microphone off, and you have the opportunity to promote in any way you wish. If you want to shout folks out, the only thing, like I said, you cannot say is a dollar amount. Folks, once they get in touch with you, websites or telephone numbers or ones, and you can work out whatever that is from that point. But I'm going to turn the mic off, and you have the opportunity to promote.
Oh, thank you. So if anybody wants more information about what I do, you can visit my website, which is Laura Berg Inc. It's INC, so Laura, LAURA, Berg, BERGINC.com. And that's my Thriving Life website where I do a lot of my guest speaking, and my contact information is there. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Of course, my book is available on any online platform that you probably shop on, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, those type of outlets. And my other website, if you're interested in baby sign language, is mysmarthands.com. And all my social channels are on both of my websites, so you can find me there.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for rising early with me this morning, calling all the way out of Toronto, Canada.
My pleasure.
Had a wonderful time chatting with you. The book, I will read the book. There's no question about it. I'm going to read it. And the show is recorded. It'll be on my YouTube channel. I will send you the MP3 link and the YouTube link. Feel free to use them in any manner you choose, as they will be yours.
Oh, thank you.
All right. All right. Well, I tell you what, have a wonderful day, and just know you are worthy. Don't let that voice fool you. You are worthy. And so have a wonderful and worthy day. And take care. We'll be in touch.
Okay, great.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.